The fourth volume in Joshua Williamson's ongoing Superman series, Rise of the Superwoman, is a great jumping on point and fully achieves the goals of the All-In initiative. With an interesting story that I'm excited to see unfold and evolve in the future, I would say this is a successful revamp of the Man of Steel and well worth a read. Comment down below what you guys thought of this volume. I'm Brennan for the New Wave Nerds. Like and subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's roll the intro. Rise of the Superwoman is written by Joshua Williamson and penciled by Laura Braga, Dan Mora, Nikola, Cizmesija, and Edwin Galmon, and in it, with unexpected twists and heart-pounding moments, Lois finds herself in a whirlwind of conflicts, challenges, and a race for survival that will redefine what it means to be Superwoman. Buckle up, because this high-stakes adventure is going to be one for the ages. And the trade paperback collects Superman issues number 19 through 24, as well as the Superwoman Special number 1. Now, as always, we're going to begin with a brief non-spoiler review here. Of course, this is keeping in tune with the rest of my commentary on Joshua Williamson's ongoing Superman series. I really enjoy it. I think it is written very well. Like I mentioned in the intro, I think this is a great jumping on point. It obviously has some things that tie back to previous continuities and previous series, but even so, it does a good job of explaining what has happened in the past while also tying it into the things of the future. In contrast to some of the other issues, the other beginning issues of the All-In initiative, I think this one really serves that purpose and is a really fun read besides. I think it's really interesting, and like I said, I'm really excited to see what Joshua Williamson is going to do with Superman in the future. I think it's well worth a read, and if you are a little bit unsure and you don't want to read up to 20 issues of Superman, I would say that you could start with Rise of the Superwoman, get the gist of it, and know what is going to happen in the future. I think it is very well done, and I can't recommend it enough. Now, we're going to get into the spoiler section here, but before we do, I'm going to very politely ask you all to head on over to patreon.com/newwavenerds. If you like the work that we do here and want to help us make these videos look and sound even better, then that is the place to go. We have various tiers with various benefits starting as low as $3 a month, and we would really appreciate it if you enjoy what we do here helping out. Every little helps, and we're doing a very special patron drive where if we get 15 new patrons or hit $50 a month, then we're going to release a very special minimum of 12-part series where Shade and I take a look at DC's classic comics event, Crisis on Infinite Earths. There's going to be a minimum of 12 episodes. I think we have an extra 13th planned as well. So you're looking at probably, considering the fact that Shade and I jabber on quite a bit, it's probably going to be 15 hours worth of content. And we want to make these videos look and sound as best as humanly possible. And we want to make this a veritable docu-series. So if you like what we do here and want to help us make it even better, go to patreon.com/newwavenerds. Now, let's get into the spoiler section, and to do that, we're going to first enter Chapter 1, The Woman of Steel. After the events of the DC Comics series Absolute Power, the universe is in shambles. Things have changed and everything is different, and as part of that difference, Lois Lane now has the powers of Superman and has become the Superwoman. Now, I'm not going to talk necessarily too much about the specifics of her mindset in all of this, because I did a whole review on the Superwoman Special when that came out quite a while ago. So if you wanted my in-depth thoughts on that specific issue and how Lois interacts with these powers, then that is the place to go. But I do want to say here that normally I'm not a fan of other people gaining the powers of Superman through, various means. I'm not a huge fan of the power switching. But in this case, I think it does work well because it's not done in the standard way, I feel. The way that Lois gets her powers is going to directly tie into what I imagine is the first major Superman crossover event in the All-In initiative, and I am really excited for that. I think they worked it in an interesting way, and I'm curious to see how that evolves moving forward. both with the man from whom she gains her powers. I guess I don't need to dance around it because we're in the spoiler section. It's General Zod. I'm excited to see how that plays out, as well as the connection to Lex Luthor. What is going to happen there? Was Lex working with Zod, or was Lex actively trying to steal the powers of Zod? And so when Zod comes to Earth, he's searching for Lex first and then finds Superman in Lois Lane. I'm not sure, but I think it's really, really interesting. I think it's pretty well done. And like I said, this is not something that I'm necessarily super into, just the general concept of other people gaining the powers of Superman, or of other people just gaining the powers of their counterparts. But I think Lois performs really admirably. I think it's written really well. I really enjoy seeing the way that she operates with these powers. And again, I'm not going to talk about the Superwoman Special. I'm just going to talk specifically on the main continuity Superman issues in the ongoing series, so 19 to 24. I think it is really interesting the way that Lois keeps her personality after she gains these superpowers. She doesn't let them affect her in the way that some other people, some other characters would. She still remains Lois Lane, the reporter, and it leads to some interesting interactions with the the main villain of this story arc, who we're going to talk a little bit about later on. I think Lois is really, really interesting, and I just have to say, I love the suit design. I think it looks really, really good. I think it's good, and it's weird because I really like the Superwoman design, and it feels almost like Supergirl's costume design from the Smallville season 11 comic, but mixed with just the classic Superman. I think it's really, really interesting, and I like it especially in contrast with the current Supergirl costume, which I really, really don't like. I don't like it. I don't like the jacket motif. I think it works for like 90s Superboy, for 90s Con-El, but I don't like it on Supergirl. I'm glad that they didn't give it to Lois. And the other thing is that I sort of like how this costume feels like an homage to the costume designed by Frank Quitely for All-Star Superman. It's obviously not the exact same. There are very stark differences, but it to me, it seems like it has the same feel. I think I like this costume more than the one from All-Star, but I like, for example, the fact that she's still got the like capsule belt things. I think it's really interestingly designed, and I really, really would like to see it more. I really would like to see it more. I'm not sure how it's going to play out in the future. I am, I think, 2 issues behind on Superman, so I know kind of what's going to go on with Lois, but I don't really want to explicitly say because this is a spoiler section for this comic arc and not what happens afterwards. But I really would like to see more of the suit, and for that matter, it's not that transition didn't make any sense. Sorry, I was trying to look up a specific thing at the moment, and right now I can't find it, but that's okay. In any case, I think it's really interesting to see Lois with the superpowers, and I like the way that, again, it actually folds into the story. It doesn't feel like necessarily a decision that was made just to be made and just to give Lois something cool to do. It actually does have an impact and does play into the story, and I think that's a testament to the writing of Joshua Williamson. I think it's very, very well done. Now, that's enough of the Lois Lane-centric discussion. Let's head into Chapter 2, A Doomed Future. The way the story arc begins is so interesting to me. We begin, and it just starts with a title card where all it says is "The End." And we see a future. It is allegedly the end of time. And it is simply Superman floating in the void with a classic DC villain called the Time Trapper. And I think there's a really, really interesting conversation that's had here. There's a line specifically where the Time Trapper says, an ancient philosopher once theorized that as long as there is a Superman, there is hope in the universe. Here, let me see it. It says, the great philosopher Tenzil Kem once speculated that as long as there is a Superman, there is hope in the universe for a better tomorrow. And I love that line. That's one of those lines that so succinctly hits at the core of Superman to me. And I really love that throughout all of the books where Superman is sort of involved in this current DC All-In initiative, they are focusing on the fact that Superman is this beacon of hope and that he is sort of the embodiment of hope in the universe. And I really enjoy that aspect. I've always sort of liked the idea that Superman, Clark Kent, is essentially an immortal being. And so because of that, he's going to have to watch his loved ones fade away into nothing as he continues to try and struggle and strive for the better tomorrow. I think that's always been an interesting story plot point to me. But that being said, I also do like the idea, and I can't remember which comic this is shown in, but there's one specific story where it's revealed that Clark Kent lives until like the 31st century, or the 32nd century, whatever it is now, because the timeline is always shifting. But Clark lives to see the birth of the Legion of Superheroes, the group of young superpowered teenagers who are formed in Superman's memory. And then after that, he dies. That's an interesting plot point too. But I really like the sort of immortal embodiment of hope. To me, that is really, really interesting. And that's one of those concepts that makes it so impactful when you go back and look at, like, say, the death of the Superman story from 1993. I think that's really interesting, and I really like to see it. I love the interactions that the Time Trapper has with the Super family throughout this story, because he is not necessarily the main villain here. He simply pops up every now and again to sort of try and make a deal with first Superman and then Superwoman. It's really interesting. And then a little later in the comic book, we have the reveal that the Time Trapper is actually an evolved form of Doomsday. So the way that Doomsday works, the reason that he is the ultimate killing machine is every time he dies, he is reincarnated so that he can never be killed the same way twice. And making him sort of this god of time is really, really interesting to me, especially when we get further on in the story, which is something we're not going to talk about right now. And especially when you look at the bargain that he tries to make with Superman and Superwoman. He is at the point now where it is nigh impossible for him to be defeated. But he comes to Superman and he comes to Superwoman separately, and he says, something terrible is going to happen. The future for you, the very near future for you, is not good. I know what happens, but I can help you avert it. All you have to do is kill me, and then I will ascend to being a true god of the universe. And of course, Superman and Superwoman are opposed to this. They're like, that sounds like a bad idea. But I think the interactions between them is really, really cool. And I hope that he continues to make these little brief cameo appearances throughout the rest of the story, especially given what happens to the present Doomsday. Now, to talk about the present Doomsday, we're going to have to head into Chapter 3, The Aftermath. The main villain of this series is really interesting to me as well as the addition of the Time Trapper Doomsday. The main villains don't appear until the end of the second issue, I believe, or the beginning of the third issue, or it would be the end of an issue. It's either issues 2 or 3, not necessarily important. But to really discuss them, we have to first talk a little bit about the build up there. So what happens in this must be the second issue when this happens. Doomsday returns, and he was in hell, he was banished to hell, and he died in hell, so now he has the powers of hellfire or whatever. And he's attacking Metropolis, and Superman and Superwoman eventually, of course, subdue him. Or maybe they subdue him in the first episode, actually. In the first issue. Nope. I mean, he appears in the first issue and they subdue him in the second issue. Now I understand. Sorry, my timeline was a little screwed up there. The Time Trapper has been messing with this video. But in any case, Superman and Superwoman subdue Doomsday by subjecting him to the Black Mercy, which is a plant, I suppose, a drug that is mostly used by Mongol, who is a Superman and Green Lantern villain, and it essentially lulls you into this dream state where you see the things that you most want. And of course, you know, we do have a little interlude where we see what he dreams of, and it's him destroying the world, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But they subdue Doomsday, and they imprison him underneath Supercorp. Now, after this happens, this is when the main villain shows up. And the main villains are a group called the Aftermath. And they appear and they are dressed in the same garb in which Doomsday first appeared. The sort of green hood and bodysuit with the red goggles. And to me, the callback to that design is super, super interesting to me. But their backstory itself is really fascinating. The Aftermath is a group of people whose planets, whose civilizations, whose homes have been destroyed by Doomsday. And it is their sole mission to come back and defeat him. And the Aftermath, they show up in force with a whole fleet of warships floating over Metropolis. Superman flies up to greet them, and he says, what do you want, essentially? And they say, we will take Doomsday off of your hands. Just give him to us to face justice. And Superman tries to tell them, look, you cannot defeat Doomsday, because if you do, he will just return more powerful, and we don't know what's going to happen if that happens. And of course, the villains are like, whatever, not my problem, buddy. I'm here seeking vengeance. And the leader of the Aftermath removes his hood to show that he is actually a character who Superman fought Doomsday alongside, called the Radiant. And of course, Radiant is super powerful. He's able to kill Doomsday essentially all by his lonesome, and Superman and Doomsday actually team up to defeat the Aftermath, which are now invading Metropolis. I think it's really, really interesting, and I wish, or rather, I shouldn't say I wish, because we don't know. I hope that we are going to be able to see them in the future. Now, based off of the existence of the Time Trapper and how the Aftermath are defeated in the end, I would imagine that this group is going to come back at some point, and I really, really hope they do. I would like to see this examined a little bit further. I don't necessarily want Radiant at the head anymore, just because it's a character that I'm not necessarily super familiar with. It's a character who played a part in a previous storyline. I think it would be interesting to see the ouster of the Radiant and see a new person take over the lead of the Aftermath, and to really be able to explore the impacts of Doomsday, to see how that is played out, not just on Earth, but across other worlds. Because of course we know the impact of Doomsday on Earth. He killed Superman in the 90s, right? I would like to see how is a world affected when Doomsday comes at them and they don't have someone like Superman to protect them and to save them. I think it could be really, really cool. And given that information and the information that we have on Doomsday, that he will simply reincarnate with new powers and become stronger, it would be really interesting to see Clark have to battle with that, to have to tell these people, look, I am sorry that your whole planet was destroyed, but you cannot get your justice because it will spell doom, doom, for the entire universe. I think that is super, super interesting. I think that there is a lot that could be mined there, and I really hope that they do come back. Not necessarily anytime soon. I wouldn't even necessarily say in the next 10 issues. Not even in the next 10 issues. I would like to see the return, or rather the ascension of Doomsday, quite a while before we see the return of the Aftermath. Now, to sort of explain what that sentence means a little bit, we're going to have to go into our fourth and final chapter, The Luthor Line. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ascension of Doomsday? The Aftermath? How does this tie into the Luthor Line? But believe you me, it does, and in a very big way. Like I mentioned on my last review, the running thread throughout every single one of these reviews that I've done for Joshua Williamson's run has been, how does Lex interact with this world? What is going on with him? Because he really is a sort of secondary protagonist in a lot of ways. And I think it's really, really interesting, his role in this story. So for those of you who listened to my Superman review from, I want to say 3 weeks ago at this point, it was 2 Superman reviews back in the House of Brainiac event. Lex Luthor lost his memory. And he lost his memory because he essentially linked his own brain up to the Brainiac hive mind system and short-circuited Brainiac as well as himself. That's obviously a very bare bones description of what happened, but you get the gist of it. So Lex has no memory. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't have any memory of really any science whatsoever. He's essentially a blank slate. And the way that we see him in this story is that his daughter, who was introduced I think she was introduced in the second volume of the series, The Chained. I don't know. Yes, it must have been then or maybe it was the first volume. I don't know. Not important. She has been sort of re-educating him and showing him his past, trying to get something to jog his memory. And there is an interesting moment where Lena and Lex are in, I would assume it's Lex's apartment, though I don't know if it's explicitly stated. They're at an apartment, and she is showing him footage of his past, and it is him in the green and purple power suit saying, "I will kill you, Superman." And the amnesia Lex is just looking at that and saying, that doesn't seem healthy. And so he's sort of pushing back against his past self, right? And then shortly after this happens, we get the attack of Doomsday, and then the attack of during the attack of Doomsday, Lex is out on a walk on the city, and he sees a young girl who's just standing in the street while buildings are falling down around her, and she's crying out for her mommy, and he runs forward and picks her up, saves her, and says, "Don't worry, I'll find your mommy." And a building almost collapses on them. Superman stops the building, and he says, "Run, Lex." This moment is really interesting to me because it sort of re-solidifies the point that I had made about Lex in a past video. The fact that he is, what I said in the past was that he was a genius and he is great and he could be the greatest hope for humanity if he didn't have such a big ego. And I think this series sort of solidifies that. He's unencumbered by his past. All he is just a regular guy with a sick beard, and he sees this young little girl alone about to be crushed, and he goes out of his way, risks his own life to save her. This shows to me that if Lex had all of his intelligence, if he had the intelligence now that he does then, but is simply unencumbered by his past, by his traumatic childhood, by the things that created his massive ego and the interactions with Superman, he truly could be the best hope for humanity. Because running and going and saving a girl who is about to be crushed by a building, even though it could kill you, is the action of a hero. I think it's really, really interesting. Now, as I mentioned, at this point, Luthor has no memory whatsoever. He has none of the intellect that he used to have. He doesn't have the knowledge base. He can't be a scientist because he doesn't really understand science now. Or he has the capacity to understand science, but he doesn't have that background knowledge. And the aftermath invades, and Luthor suddenly has an idea. He knows how to beat the aftermath. He a memory is sparked between him and Brainiac. And Luthor devises a plan that's going to save the day. And the way that he does it is he uses Brainiac's shrinking tech, the type of technology that is used to shrink Kandor, to shrink Kolu, to shrink, man, I don't know, what's another name city? Whatever they have of Zarnia, whatever. The shrinking tech, Luthor uses it, and he tells Superman to get the aftermath up in the air, and he shrinks the entire fleet, right? And they're discussing about what happens afterward, and Luthor is saying, don't worry, time is slowed down in the bottle. And Superman and Superwoman share this look where they know time is slowed down. What could happen if Doomsday dies in a place where time is actively being messed with? He becomes the time trapper. And I think that's such a cool way to tie everything in. It's one of those moments where you're like, at the beginning of the story, the time trapper is saying that bad things are going to happen. People are going to die. You're going to lose people you love. Pain and hardship is coming your way. And Superman is trying his hardest to essentially change the future, but he's realizing that it is out of his control. He can't change what's going to happen because, it's a set line or whatever. And so this is how Doomsday becomes the time trapper. And I think that that's really, really interesting. I have to imagine that before Joshua Williamson stops writing Superman, I have to imagine that Doomsday's going to die and we're going to see him ascend to being the time trapper. And I'm really, really interested in how that happens. I think it's going to be really, really fun. Like I've said for every single one of these reviews, the writing of Joshua Williamson here is great. I am loving the series so far. I cannot wait to see where it goes. Of course, like I mentioned, I'm a few issues behind, but so long as Joshua Williamson is writing this series, I will never unsubscribe. I will never stop reading it because it is so good to me. I love it so far. And the art of Dan Mora is really, really interesting. Although, now that I say that, I think he may have left the book now. But in any case, I think it is great. I think it is well worth a read. If you're any kind of fan of Superman, I can't recommend this enough. Like I said, even if you don't want to go back and read the previous stuff, you can jump in here and not miss a beat. You can jump in here knowing very, very little, and it all gets explained really well. I think it's great. Pick it up. Pick it up. Pick it up. Third time's a charm. Grab it. It's so good. It's the whole volume is currently available on DC Universe Infinite as well. And so if you don't necessarily want to go buy the full trade paperback, but you have access to that service, just give it a read. It's definitely one that I would recommend to anybody who is a fan of Superman. But I think that we are going to leave it there. And let's see, again, comment down below. Let me know what you thought of this. If you agree with me that this is a great jumping on point, or if I am just blinded by the fact that I have read everything leading up to this a couple times. And so, of course, it makes sense to me. That is always a worry that I have when I do anything like this. It's the same worry I have when we do when we look at adaptations. Do I dislike the adaptation because it's not the same as the source material and because I love the source material so much? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments if you think it is a great jumping on point. Now let's see what we've got coming up on the calendar. Next Tuesday, the moment is here. The time has arrived. It is time to review the new Superman movie. I am both incredibly excited and incredibly nervous for this. This is the moment that I've been waiting for like a year and a half since it was ever announced. I don't even know how to describe Superman is such an important character to me. If you haven't guessed by the fact that I've done about 1 million videos of him over the past couple months, he's one of my favorite characters of all time. Super important to me. He made one of my favorite. He's the basis of one of my favorite superhero movies of all time in Superman the movie. I am excited. I am nervous. I have no idea what to expect. And no matter what happens, we're going to have a fun time talking about it. You believe you me, we're going to have a fun time talking about it. So that's next Tuesday. And then next Thursday, the couple days after that Superman review drops, I'm going to be doing a video where I go over 15 essential Superman comics. If you're not necessarily a big comic nerd, you watch the movie and you're kind of interested in reading more, that is going to be the place to go. I've got lots of recommendations for all different kinds of readers, and I think I actually have a bonus one. So I think it's technically 15 plus 1. But in any case, there's going to be lots of recommended reading there for you. So if you like Superman, if you want some more to read, if you're having trouble figuring out where to begin, what the best stories are, then that is the video for you. And I think that is where we're going to leave it. And so I will see you guys next Tuesday to talk about The Man Against Tomorrow.